Hey, welcome back to The Room, Soul Fam. This is Season 2, Episode 19 of Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and I'm Max Soul.
And I'm Mello Soul. We're back on the tracking floor to talk about the blueprints, the foundations, and the heavy lifting that goes into the music that shapes our universe.
You bet we are. Today, family, we are tracking a man who wasn't just a band leader. This man was a master urban planner. We are deconstructing the chief spiritual engineer himself, Mr. Maurice White, the man who aligned the groove with the cosmos.
Yes, Max. Maurice's career and his multi-platinum empire, Earth, Wind, and Fire, are monumental.
Oh, they sure as shit are.
But the way this master architect got constructed started long before the multicolored Afrocentric spacesuits and the arena lights. It starts with a heavy, multi-generational musical foundation split between Memphis and Chicago.
That's right, Mello. Actually, Maurice was born right in the heart of Memphis in 1941, living in the Foot Homes projects. And his very first frequency, well, it wasn't funk. It was the sanctuary specs. Gospel music wasn't just a Sunday routine for young Maurice White. No, Soul Fam. It was the only music he was allowed to consume for the first several years of his life. His grandmother was a devout gospel singer, meaning Reese was literally tracking vocal harmonies and rhythmic call and response dynamics from the cradle.
Talk about a serious vocal boot camp, Max.
He is a badass for a young boy.
Yeah. That's where he developed his ear for stacking frequencies before he even picked up an instrument. By age 12, he found his true percussive calling and started beating the skins, quickly taking his rhythm skills out of the sanctuary and onto the streets to join his high school marching band. That's
right, Mello. Maurice was a second-generation musician, so his parents were fully immersed as well. But the family layout had a highly unique dual-spec infrastructure. Maurice's mother married a man named Verdine Adams, who was a high-achieving medical doctor in Chicago. But Soul Fam, he was also a serious gigging jazz saxophone player.
This is exactly where Maurice inherited that clinical military precision discipline, Max. Having a stepfather who was both a physician and an active horn player taught Maurice that music wasn't just a loose vibe. It was a precise academic science that required absolute mental clarity.
Right, you are, Mello. In fact, Maurice's younger half-brother, Verdine White, was originally studying to follow in those exact medical footsteps before Maurice drafted to play bass for Earth, Wind, and Fire, which, of course, we'll get to, but back to the young Reese.
Yeah, this time coincided the historic timeline of the late Great Migration.
Yeah,
Max.
everybody's moving on.
Yeah, so Maurice's mother and stepfather had already moved up north to Chicago to establish their lives and get settled, and the young Maurice stayed down in Memphis, being raised by his grandmother and a close family friend, learning his early drum chops.
And Mello, while attending Booker T. Washington High School in Memphis, Maurice's childhood best friend and bandmate, well, it was no other than Booker T. Jones, the future architect of Booker T. and the MGs, who we covered in the Stax episode,
Season 1, Episode 11, y'all.
And legendary songwriter David Porter. And they formed a cooking little band as teenagers, completely dominating the local Memphis circuit. Man, they were tearing up the local high school yards together before they even had freaking union cards. But once he hit 17 or 18 years old, Soul Fam, boom, it was time to structurally adjust.
Thus, the big geographical shift that everyone always gets twisted, Max.
They do.
People think Maurice just packed up and left Memphis on a whim to chase fame.
I don't think it would be a whim just to leave your badass band. But the reality was that it was an absolute family realignment, and that was kind of no choice for him.
Yeah, Maurice's mother and stepfather, Dr. Verdine Adams, had moved up north to Chicago years earlier to build a life, leaving young Maurice in Memphis to finish growing up under his grandmother's roof. But once Maurice hit 18...
yeah, time to go.
Yeah, well, the family infrastructure was ready to be reunited, and it feels so good.
It does.
Oops, that was DC, sorry. Wrong episode, y'all.
Right.
Anyway, so Mom and Dad said come, and Reese packed up his snare drum and headed straight up the highway to reunite with his folks. And look at the double-barrel blueprint waiting for him when he landed in the Windy City, Max. His stepfather wasn't just a prominent medical doctor. Dr. Adams was a heavy, active jazz saxophone player on the local Chicago night scene.
Man, look at that dual-spec infrastructure we were talking about before. Having a stepfather who was both a physician and a gigging horn player taught Maurice early on that music wasn't just a loose vibe, as we said. It was a precise clinical science. This required absolute mental clarity. And Dr. Adams looked at Maurice, and he laid down a strict family mandate. He said, if you're going to live under this roof, you're going to go to college, and you're going to get your technical specifications stamped.
Well, when he arrived, Max...
Guess you heard him, right?
Yeah. When he arrived, he went and enrolled in a local junior college before walking straight into the prestigious Chicago Musical Conservatory to master in musical theory and classical percussion.
No, Soul Fam, Maurice White didn't leave the Memphis music scene because he was done with it. No, he outgrew the local zone. He took that raw southern gospel, blues, and dirt he dug up in Memphis, carried it right up the highway, and slammed it right into the academic high-fidelity infrastructure of Chicago. And that exact cross-pollination is what made him an absolute lethal weapon the second he stepped through the doors at Chess Records, which we'll get to also. But first, Maurice walked straight into the prestigious Chicago Musical Conservatory, as we said, to master music theory and classical percussion. So by day, he's studying European orchestration, and by night, he's hitting the smoky nightclub planks.
And that elite dual education combo is exactly what caught the attention of Chess Records in 1963.
I would 100% bet it did.
Absolutely. They saw a young 21-year-old who possessed a raw, deep Southern gospel grease from Memphis, but could read complex charts like a classical conductor.
Badass.
But Max, the way he actually secured that job wasn't a standard cattle call audition. It was an absolute tactical coup.
Well, for fuck's sake, Mel, let's talk about an executive entrance. When the front office at Chess called him for a tracking audition, Maurice didn't just show up with his sticks under his arm like a basic freelance subcontractor looking for a day rate. No. Maurice pulled a full lead architect ambush. He went back to the conservatory, rounded up 20 of his fellow music students, some horn players, a couple string players, and some theory nerds, and he marched them back right through the front of 2120 South Michigan Avenue to act as his personal live backing orchestra. How is that for ballsy, Mel?
Okay.
Right? He wanted Leonard Chess and the executives to see that he wasn't just a timekeeper. He was an operator who could arrange, conduct, and direct a massive multi-instrumental frame.
Man, that is that executive strategy from day one.
He's so badass.
Yeah, he completely broke the standard audition template. The executives were so blown away by his command of the room that they hired him on the spot as the official house drummer. And they even put 4 of his school buddies on the payroll with him. How about that?
5 gigs.
Okay. And brought him straight to the ultimate master mason behind the scenes, Uncle Willie Dixon.
Oh, yeah, the ultimate load-bearing column of the blues himself, Mello. So he was the house producer, the head talent scout, the chief arranger, and the master songwriter who wrote the blueprints for Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Coco Taylor. I mean, we're talking Wang Dang Doodle here, yo. A huge blues record soul fam.
That's some industrial strength grit, y'all. Willie Dixon took the young conservatory-trained drummer directly under his wing.
Indeed he did, Mello. Maurice spent his early days sitting right next to Willie, who would play stand-up bass while Maurice anchored the rhythm on the skins. By tracking daily with Dixon, Maurice, he didn't just learn how to keep time, he absorbed the absolute secret science of songwriting, structural pacing, and studio command.
He watched how Willie arranged simple blues frameworks so perfectly that they could capture a global audience, Max. It was that exact mentorship from Willie Dixon that transformed Maurice from a highly literate session player into a master producer capable of building Earth, Wind, and Fire.
But Maurice was working a dual shift at Chess, as we were talking about, because while he was getting that raw Southern dirt from Willie Dixon during the day shift, man, he was also anchoring this brand new high-octane pop soul wing run by the legendary producer Billy Davis at night, y'all.
Billy Davis was the chief technical director of that entire mid-60s Chess soul expansion, and his impact on Reese was massive. While Willie Dixon taught Maurice how to capture the raw emotional spirit of the music, Billy Davis taught him the literal clinical manufacturing blueprint of how to engineer a global pop soul smash.
Billy Davis wasn't just a guy sitting in a booth chewing on a cigar. He was a brilliant, hyper-literate composer, arranger, and an executive. Before he landed at Chess, well, guess what? Billy Davis was in Detroit working as the main songwriting and producing partner for Berry Gordy in the late 1950s, which was pre-Motown. Mm-hmm. Davis actually co-wrote massive foundational hits like Lonely Teardrops for Jackie Wilson.
Indeed he did, Max.
Yeah.
When Leonard Chess realized that Motown was starting to eat his lunch, he poached Davis to come to Chicago and construct an assembly line to fight back.
That's right.
Oh, a little payback for Berry, Max.
Right?
I guess in his mind, it's poach or be poached, y'all. Berry Gordy was a king of shade.
Yes, payback is a bitch, Mello. So back to Billy Davis we go. It's my guess that because he came from an assembly line, well, fuck, he knew how to build one. Mm-hmm. So soul fam Billy Davis brought a military-grade discipline to the Chess Studios at 2120 South Michigan Avenue. He was an early master of vocal stacking, rhythm displacement, and forcing musicians to rehearse until their execution was completely seamless. Motown specs, Mello, and damn sure that wasn't happening in the afternoon on the blues sessions.
Of course. Maurice White didn't just play drums for Billy Davis. He sat at his feet and studied his administrative and creative layout. Maurice absorbed 3 major peer lessons from Davis that became the exact bedrock of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
First up is vocal stacking and frequency layering, Mello. Davis was a master at taking multiple distinct vocalists, say like Etta James or Fontella Bass, and arranging their harmonies so that they pierce through dense horn and rhythm sections. Maurice used that exact blueprint later when balancing his own baritone with Philip Bailey's falsetto and the emotions harmonies.
Second is the pop soul crossover formula, Max. Billy Davis taught Maurice that you didn't have to sacrifice your black musical heritage to get played on white pop radio.
That's right, you didn't.
No, you just had to make the rhythm section so undeniable and the arrangement so structurally perfect that the mainstream algorithm had no choice but to index it.
No choice. And third, he ran his tracking rooms with absolute authority. He demanded punctuality, total focus, and infinite takes until a pocket was mathematically correct. Motown and Chi-Town, y'all. Maurice adopted this exact corporate framework for EWF, the strict diets, the mandatory rehearsal blocks, and the absolute elimination of sloppy habits on the job site. Oh, this Billy Davis connection is massive, Mello. Massive. And when he produced Fontella Bass's historic 1965 smash Rescue Me, Maurice White was the upstart drummer driving that relentless backbeat with his future EWF partner Louis Satterfield holding down the electric bass.
Here we have the evening R&B side of Chess.
Some badass shit going on up that night in Chess.
When Fontella Bass walked into 2120 South Michigan Avenue in late August of '65 to cut Rescue Me, the session was run by the new school production team of Billy Davis, Carl Smith, and Reynard Minor. They explicitly told Maurice that they wanted a heavy, driving Motown swing with a massive backbeat and explosive drum fills.
But unfortunately, Willie Dixon's heavy upright jazz and blues swing was way too old school for that specific radio frequency. So instead of Dixon, as we said, this low-end steel beam on that track was held down by Louis Satterfield, the monster electric bassist who would later join Maurice in California as a foundation stone for the Phoenix Horns. This is the actual studio lineup that day. Maurice was on drums with that relentless backbeat. Louis Satterfield was carrying the kinetic pop soul groove on bass. And this guy, Pete Corsi, who played with Miles Davis, he was playing guitar, and Gene Barge was the tenor sax player. And background mellow, a teenage Minnie Riperton. Man, Maurice literally wrote in his memoirs that the groove was so tight that when they finished the second take, the room went completely dead silent. Man, you could have heard a rat licking ice. It became Chess's first million-selling single in a decade. Badass.
Yeah, that track was a corporate renovation, Max. It was Chess's first million seller in a decade, like you said. And while Willie Dixon owned the day with the blues,
which he surely did,
but Billy Davis ruled the night.
Oh, hell yeah.
Maurice was sitting right there absorbing Billy Davis's blueprint.
Exactly. Maurice was the ultimate chameleon. He used Willie Dixon to learn how to excavate the raw emotional foundation of black music. But he used his conservatory training and the soul wing to learn how to frame it for a massive global stadium audience. And then he mixed it with Billy Davis's industrial pop blueprint, and he packed it all in his luggage and said, yo, that's the lesson for every artist today. Don't choose between the grit and the polish. Master both specs so you can build a skyscraper that lasts. That's what Maurice did.
And speaking of skyscrapers, Max, coming up next, we're talking about the Ramsey Lewis Matrix and the transcontinental jump to the West Coast and how Maurice used his little astrological chart to rezone the salty peppers into Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's right. Stick around, Soul Fam. We'll be right back.
You're cold lamp chilling with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
Hey, welcome back to Architects of Soul. So before we dive deeper into Maurice White, the Chess Records engine, and his journey into the stratosphere, if you like this content, if you're picking up what we're putting down, hey, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel.
And remember, there's a video version available on our YouTube page. And as a matter of fact, it's now also available on Apple Podcasts.
That's right.
And it's also available on our host site, buzzsprout.com. And if you get the chance while you're on our YouTube page, give a listen to some of our music. You're listening to it every time you listen to our show, so check out our new vibe. Okay, Max, let's get into the late 60s. Maurice had just conquered the session world at Chess, but he knew he couldn't just stay a subcontractor on someone else's floor.
So how did the next door unlock for Maurice? Well, Soul Fam, Maurice is playing rough local blues joints and high-pressure studio sessions. This is when the lesson of the high-end venue specification comes in. And it starts with an absolute industrial mutiny. In 1966, the Ramsey Lewis Trio had the biggest crossover instrumental record in the country with the in crowd. Man, they were printing cash. But right at the peak of their market cap, Ramsey's original rhythm section, L.D. Young and Isaac Red Holt, abruptly packed up their bags and walked off the job site over an intense financial dispute to form their own group called Young Holt Unlimited.
Right, Max. Ramsey Lewis was left with a massive headlining tour schedule and a completely hollowed out foundation. He needed elite union-grade contractors, and he needed them immediately. He hired Cleveland Eaton to anchor the low-end steel upright bass, and then Max, he poached him. Yeah, he poached Maurice White straight off the Chess Records session floor to take over the drum throne. Talk about stepping onto a moving high-speed train, Max. Ramsey operated in a completely different zoning code. The trio played upscale jazz rooms, massive college campuses, yes, and legendary historic spots like the Apollo Theater.
Which, of course, hits the absolute dead center of my mixing board, Mello. Back in the day, I was lucky and had the distinct honor of sliding the faders and mixing the great Ramsey Lewis live at the Apollo Theater. So I can tell you firsthand from the console, the acoustic clarity and the sheer class of Ramsey's operation was top-tier industrial steel.
Maurice explicitly stated in his memoirs that his 3 years touring the global skyline with Ramsey Lewis completely shaped his vision beyond just the tracking tape, Max.
Ramsey was a master.
Yeah, he absorbed 2 specific operational guidelines.
Yes, Soul Fam. Maurice learned how to dress like an executive, handle white-glove corporate promoters, and command a highly sophisticated multi-market audience. First principle was a performance and staging blueprint. Ramsey wasn't a dry jazz player. He was a showman. He taught Maurice that a live concert shouldn't just be musicians staring at their shoes. It had to be an event.
Maurice watched how Ramsey Lewis paced the set list, Soul Fam, how he engaged the room and used stage dynamics to manipulate the crowd's energy. Maurice took notes and thought, if I can do this with a jazz trio, imagine what I can do with a 10-piece funk orchestra.
The germination of an idea.
Right, and Maurice was sitting right there on the drum riser for 3 years, absorbing that exact upscale showmanship.
Exactly, and here's where we see the sacred discovery from the architect Mello. While touring with Ramsey in 1967, Maurice walks into a boutique drum shop and spots an authentic African thumb piano, a kalimba. He was completely hypnotized by its ancient acoustic signature. So he throws it in his luggage and figures out how to amplify it through a modern studio gear. And in 1969, Soul Fam, on the final album Maurice ever recorded with the trio, it was called Another Voyage, he convinced Ramsey to let him lay down a track centered entirely around this new instrument. The track is called Uhura, the Swahili word for freedom. It opens with Cleveland Eaton popping a funky upright bass line, and then Maurice steps up and plays the main melody on the kalimba. It marks the first time in human history that a kalimba was tracked onto a commercial jazz soul record. That exact melody was so foundational to Maurice's spirit that he resurrected it 14 years later as the melodic interlude for the song Mizar on Earth, Wind & Fire's 1983 Powerlight album.
Yeah, pretty wild, Max. The mind of an innovator and a relationship that did not end there. The absolute beauty of this architectural cycle happened 8 years later.
Sure did.
Yeah, by 1974, Earth, Wind & Fire was the hottest group on the planet. While Ramsey's acoustic jazz model was starting to see a dip in the mainstream metrics, Maurice didn't forget the man who gave him his structural licensing. He returned to his old boss as a master freelance developer.
Master.
Maurice co-wrote, produced, and brought the entire Earth, Wind & Fire band into the studio to back Ramsey Lewis on his historic 1974 crossover smash title track, Sun Goddess.
And we all love that.
I love that song.
Oh, that music is so amazing. Maurice took Ramsey off the traditional acoustic piano, too. He sat him behind a Fender Rhodes electric keyboard, and he layered Philip Bailey's wordless celestial falsetto harmonies right over the top of that greasy Earth, Wind & Fire rhythm tracking pass. Oof, that's some badass shit. Mm-hmm. It shot straight to the top of the charts, completely retrofitting Ramsey's career for the stadium funk era. Man, he didn't burn the bridge, family. He upgraded the foundation that put him on. And then Soul Fam, proving his multi-zone marketing literacy, Maurice was brought in to co-produce Barbra Streisand's emotional album in 1984 and tracks for Neil Diamond, showing Hollywood that his production specs crossed all racial and genre boundaries.
That's a huge lesson for modern artists.
It's huge.
Never forget the supervisors who trained you. But Max, after the Ramsey Lewis era, Maurice decides it's time to build his own prototype house. He forms a 3-man production firm with his songwriting partners, Wade Flemons and Don Whitehead, and they call themselves the Salty Peppers.
That's right, Mello. They signed a quick developmental contract with Capitol Records. They were cooking up tight, punchy Midwestern R&B pop grooves that were highly seasoned with jazz and gospel chords, hence the kitchen name. They dropped a track called La La Time in 1969 that became a solid regional smash in Chicago. Okay, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But when their second tracking pass, completely stalled out on the national charts. I don't know, the title didn't really do it for me. Maurice did a quick audit of the corporate ledger, and he realized, hey, Salty Pepper's blueprint was too small, too localized, and too old school. They were making good money writing local radio commercial jingles, but they were just subcontracting their talent to the corporations. Man, Maurice wanted 100% of the deed to his own master recordings, and he knew he needed a massive West Coast market, to scale it. So in 1969, he packed up the master tapes and caught a transcontinental flight to Los Angeles.
This is the ultimate astral rezoning story, Max. Once he landed in California, Maurice completely stepped out of the Midwestern box.
Completely disappeared.
Yeah. He started diving deep into astrology, Egyptology, and metaphysics. He realized that if he wanted to build an empire that could elevate global consciousness, the name of the vessel had to carry a supreme spiritual weight.
And so he was going back to the ancestors. Mm-hmm. The cosmic engineering, it was deep, family. He literally sat down with his own astrological natal chart. He was a Sagittarius, born December 19th in 1941. And when he mapped out the elemental specs of his zodiac sign, he saw that Sagittarius is primarily a fire sign. but carries heavy spiritual qualities of air and earth. The only element missing from this personal chart was what? Water? Water. Okay. So he looked at the paper, crossed out the salty peppers on the ledger, and christened the new 10-man California lineup Earth, Wind, and Fire.
There you go. He intentionally left.
Who knew?
Yeah, and he intentionally left the water out so the groove wouldn't get soggy.
That's a smart man. He's from Chicago. He knows how cold it can be.
Exactly. He calls up his teenage little brother, Verdine White, who is still back in Chicago studying music, and tells him, pack your bass and get on a plane to L.A. right now. We're breaking ground on something that's going to outlive the stadium.
Damn straight, Mello. He was about to stand on his blueprint, rezone his company from the kitchen cabinet to the cosmos, and build a permanent space station that would sell 90 million records.
How about that?
Oh, my God.
Well, coming up next, we're talking about the arrival of the ultimate cosmic sorcerer, Charles Stepney, and how Maurice White built a billion-dollar hit factory.
You're listening to Max and Mello's Architect's Soul. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Sit tight, y'all. Hey, welcome back to Architects of Soul. Now, if you're an artist or an executive on the job site today, you might think you've reached your maximum height once you score a couple of hit records. But Maurice White didn't believe in standard ceiling heights.
No, he wanted them high ceilings.
Exactly. He was expanding his property lines into deep space. And Max, this is the ultimate skyscraper breakout story.
I would say.
Yeah, it's about what happens when a master builder decides to construct an entire multi-platinum empire under his own corporate deed.
It's quite a tall order, Mello, but not for Maurice White, apparently. After Reese moved to Los Angeles and invited Verdine to join him, well, he officially changed the name of the group from the Salty Peppers to, as we said, Earth, Wind, and Fire, based on the elements of his astrological chart. And with the original 10-piece lineup locked in, Maurice shopped their demo tapes and managed to get a deal with Warner Brothers Records.
And under Warner Brothers, they recorded and released 2 albums, their self-titled debut in March 1971 and The Need of Love in November 1971. They even tracked the raw, funky soundtrack for Melvin Van Peebles' landmark independent film.
You bet. Sweetback's badass song.
Remember that?
Yeah, I sure do. But despite building a passionate following on college campuses, the original lineup began to suffer from extreme internal stress and creative friction. Following the release of their second album, the band completely collapsed and split up. Maurice decided to clear the entire floor and initiate a total controlled demolition of the group. Blowed up real good. He retained not only one single pillar from the original framing. Who was that going to be? His brother Verdine on bass. I mean, come on. In 1972, though, Maurice redrafted the band's entire infrastructure from scratch. He brought in the high-frequency falsetto of Philip Bailey, Larry Dunn on keyboards, Ralph Johnson on percussion, and rhythm guitarist Roland Bautista, completely shifting the group's sonic blueprint.
The newly reconstituted Earth, Wind, and Fire successfully auditioned for managers Bob Cavallo and Joe Ruffalo. Cavallo used his industry influence to plug the young group as the opening act for folk pop star John Sebastian of the Lovin' Spoonful.
I don't know how much of a plug that was, but it turned out to be critical, right?
Yeah, it was a major tour. The critical structural convergence happened during a high-profile performance at New York's Rockefeller Center.
That's right, because standing in the wings of that Rockefeller Center gig was Clive Davis, the legendary high-powered president of Columbia Records, who we covered a few weeks ago on Season 2, Episode 13, y'all. Davis watched Earth, Wind, and Fire's high-energy, genre-bending performance and realized their progressive soul-funk frequency was the future of the industry. Man, he was so thoroughly blown away that he didn't even wait for the contract to expire, Mello. In a massive music business power move, Clive Davis stepped in and completely bought out Earth, Wind, and Fire's recording contract directly from Warner Brothers Records. He rezoned them over to Columbia, brought their Warner Brothers producer Joe Wissert along for continuity, and gave them the heavy marketing capital and institutional patience required to turn the band into a global multi-platinum skyscraper. Clive was like that, man. By late 1972, they made their official Columbia Records debut with the album Last Days and Times that completely launched the legendary era that we know of today.
A big move for a big dream, Max.
Oh, my God, huge.
Yeah, but he wasn't done, though. Reese knew that a lot of cats get a hit and then let the label control the blueprint.
Yeah, well, that wasn't going to be how he was running.
No. By 1974, Maurice had Earth, Wind & Fire running at peak global efficiency on Columbia Records, and he decided it was time to step into the role of solo proprietor and developer. He founded Columbia Productions to start building hits for other prime assets on the ledger.
That's right, Mello. He wasn't just a band leader anymore. He was a master general contractor poaching the best raw talent off the circuit. Take Denise Williams, for example. Maurice saw her singing backup frequencies for Stevie Wonder, recognized her pristine 4-octave material specs, and signed her straight to Columbia to produce her 1976 debut album, This Is Niecy. He engineered that delicate, soaring soul pop infrastructure for her global smash Free.
And then he schwacked it again.
Schwacked
it with the Emotions, Max.
He did.
He took this legendary Chicago sister act who were struggling with their previous label layouts, brought them into his studio laboratory, and completely retrofitted their sound.
Another mad scientist.
Yeah. He produced their iconic 1977 album, Rejoice, writing and guiding those razor-sharp piston pump horn lines for Best of My Love, which became one of the most sampled female group anthems in human history.
Oh, hell yeah. And Mello, the backstory behind the Emotions and their 1977 monster hit Best of My Love is a masterclass in musical engineering, resilience, and pure gospel-bred power plant vocals. Sisters Wanda, Sheila, and Jeanette Hutchinson started out as a childhood gospel act in Chicago called the Heavenly Sunbeams, and they eventually crossed over into secular R&B, signing with the legendary Stax Records as the Emotions. However, when Stax collapsed into bankruptcy in 1975, well, the sisters were left completely without a home label or blueprints for their future. Uh-oh.
Enter Maurice White.
There you go.
The mastermind and lead architect of Earth, Wind & Fire. White knew the sisters from his early drumming days in Chicago and recognized that their vocal infrastructure was a powerhouse waiting for the right tracking floor. He signed them to his Columbia Productions machine and secured them a contract with Columbia Records, setting out to co-write and produce their 1977 landmark album, Rejoice.
You know, Mello, Best of My Love wasn't just a track given to the sisters. It was structurally engineered by the Earth, Wind & Fire rhythmic infrastructure. So the story goes that Earth, Wind & Fire guitarist Al McKay brought a home demo to Maurice White. Originally, the track was slow as molasses. But once they kicked the tempo up into that bouncy Chicago swing, man, the foundation snapped perfectly into place. So McKay laid down that plucky rhythm guitar line on one of the greatest un-quantized bass grooves in freaking history. The studio floor was loaded with Earth, Wind & Fire personnel, including Fred White on drums, Verdine on bass, and Larry Dunn on synthesizers, along with Clarence McDonald on keys, and let's not skip legendary audio engineer George Massenberg, who literally beta-tested custom prototype limiters and compressors with wires hanging out of the side during these overdub sessions to achieve that massive, bright, and clean sound displacement and being a mad scientist.
The true high-octane magic and the raw emotion of the track, Max, came down to the vocal tracking sessions with lead singer Wanda Hutchinson. Maurice had recorded the song's demo an octave lower than where he ultimately wanted the final vocals to sit. When Wanda stepped up to the microphone and nailed the first note of the first take in their lower register, White immediately stopped the tape deck.
Take note, Soul Fam. So, Wanda, White told her, you got to sing it an octave higher. Sing the entire track a full octave higher. Singing the entire track a full octave higher forced Wanda into her absolute upper register, pushing her vocal cords to a point of intense physical strain. But that structural stress is exactly what gave that track its performative ecstasy. Wanda didn't just sing the melody. Man, she belted out with an elemental, raw-throated, gospel-infused urgency over that sunny, unrelenting disco soul groove. Oh, behind her sisters Sheila and Jeanette locked down the backline frame with dizzying precision. The vocals are incredible on that song. During the bridge, as Wanda unleashes wild, exultant vocal runs, the sisters take off heavyweight right before the home break, releasing a absolutely, completely harmonics, ecstatic ow! A single vocal snapshot so perfect, it has been sampled hundreds of times in hip-hop history.
Right, and released in May 1977.
That song is so fucking badass.
It really is. Released in May 1977, Best of My Love became an absolute skyscraper of a crossover smash.
Unreal.
It went straight to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 5 non-consecutive weeks, topped the R&B charts, and earned the sisters a platinum record and a Grammy Award for Best R&B Performance.
What an arrangement.
Yeah. It remains a master blueprint of how a pure gospel gospel architecture wrapped in a high-pressure disco funk frame can create timeless global energy.
And we have a winner. Maurice White had the corporate pipes, Mello, and he's feeding the entire music industry with top-tier soul water. Man, he proved that his production specs crossed all racial, jazz, and pop zoning lines.
But Max, to run an empire that massive, you've got to have serious business literacy and field discipline. The street lore on how Maurice ran the EWF tour infrastructure is legendary.
Oh, yeah. He enforced a strict check your vices corporate mandate, Mello. Maurice ran Earth, Wind, and Fire with a military-grade precision. All right? No drugs, no booze on the entire tour layout. He put the whole 10-piece orchestra on strict vegetarian diets, taught them yoga, and led mandatory meditation sessions right on the locker room floor before they ever stepped onto the planks. He famously told the crew, if your spirit is dirty, the music is going to sound sloppy.
Man, talk about a clean signal chain.
No, that's some wild shit.
He knew that to handle that kind of intense arena torque, the human machinery had to be fully calibrated. And because his corporate ledgers were pristine, he had the liquidity to design the most insane multi-million-dollar visual stage spectacles the world had ever seen.
And you know what, Mel? They were building an intergalactic landing site. Maurice didn't want a standard R&B review layout with guys just stepping left to right at a mic stand. Oh, no, not for Maurice. He wanted total visual displacement. So he hired world-famous master illusionist Doug Henning and his young upstart assistant David Copperfield to design the stage mechanics for the Spirit and All in All tours. Can you just imagine?
I can imagine. Exactly, Max. They were running high-tech illusions right in the middle of a funk groove.
Badass.
Philip Bailey would literally levitate into the air over the drum kit, and the entire horn section would suddenly materialize inside of spinning glass cylinders on the stage planks. The industry had never seen that level of stadium industrial stagecraft.
Damn straight, Mello.
I remember that tour. It was crazy.
I did not see that tour, but I can only imagine. Those two guys are amazing illusionists.
Yeah.
So it must have been phenomenal. But I'll tell you what, he took black music out of the local Chitlin circuit clubs and built a multi-million-dollar space station. And because he built it on clean, uplifting, high-integrity materials, his skyline became permanent. He took black music out of the local Chitlin circuit clubs and built a multi-million-dollar space station. And because he built it on clean, uplifting, high-integrity materials, his skyline became permanent. So when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease later in life, he calmly stepped back from the road, but he retained 100% executive control over his master licensing, his brand assets, and his independent equity. He protected his deed to the very end.
Coming up next, we're talking about the arrival of the ultimate cosmic sorcerer, Charles Stepney, and the deep emotional architecture behind the Spirit album.
One of my favorite songs, Spirit. It's an absolutely magnificent piece of music. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the genius of Charles Stepney. So don't go anywhere.
You're chilling with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning into Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Architects of Soul. And before we dive back into the world of Maurice White, if you like this content,
Right, Mello, if you're buying what we're selling.
please tick the like and subscribe to our channel and let us know what you're thinking.
Right, and our video now is showing up in Buzzsprout, which is our host, and Apple Podcasts, as well as on our YouTube channel.
So give us some feedback, Soul fans.
Yes, sir. Tell us how we're doing. Now, Mello, we got to bring the ultimate cosmic sorcerer into the equation, Mr. Charles Stepney. This man was a staff arranger at Chess, sitting in the back room putting classical strings and Moog synthesizers on top psychedelic soul for acts like Rotary Connection. He was operating in a whole different time zone, family. Whole different time zone. If Billy Davis was the industrial engineer and Willie Dixon was the soul of the foundation, man, Charles Stepney is the supreme cosmic architect who handed Maurice White the keys to the fifth dimension. Stepney is the missing link between the street-level grid of Chicago soul and the cinematic orchestral space station majesty of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And when Maurice added Charles Stepney to the internal equation, he wasn't just adding a musician. He was adding a mathematical genius who knew how to turn a horn arrangement into an interstellar highway.
Charles Stepney was a homegrown Chicago prodigy, a multi-instrumentalist, vibraphonist, pianist, and master composer who read orchestral scores the way average cats read the Morning Ledger. Stepney was working as a staff producer and chief arranger at Chess Records right alongside Billy Davis. While Davis was running the tight pop soul assembly line, Stepney was in the back laboratory experimenting with Moog synthesizers, Baroque classical string arrangements, and complex jazz modal frequencies.
Yeah, Charles Stepney's crowning achievement before Earth, Wind & Fire was a psychedelic symphonic soul group he manufactured called Rotary Connection, as I said before, and that featured a very young and amazing Minnie Riperton.
Mm-hmm.
And Stepney took rock tracks by Muddy Water or Jimi Hendrix and layered them with massive operatic avant-garde orchestral movements. I mean, some crazy shit. Maurice sat in the studio watching Stepney do this, and his mind was completely blown. And he's thinking to himself, wow, you can take black music and give it the structural magnitude of a European symphony? Holy shit.
Right, Max. When Maurice left Chess to join the Ramsey Lewis Trio, he had reunited with Stepney, who was producing the trio's late 60s transition records. Then, when Maurice broke ground on Earth, Wind & Fire in Los Angeles, he didn't leave his Chicago architect behind. He literally flew Charles Stepney out to California to be the co-producer and master arranger for EWF's legendary run of foundational albums. Open Our Eyes in 1974, That's the Way of the World in 1975, and Spirit in 1976.
Yeah, and Charles Stepney injected three massive load-bearing concepts into Maurice's vision. They were huge. First was his symphonic funk specs. Stepney taught Maurice how to arrange horns and strings, so they didn't just pad the background, but darted in and out of the funk pocket like precision lasers. He wrote the horn arrangements for anthems like Shining Star and Reasons.
Second was the cinematic mix, Max. Stepney was a master of acoustic dynamics. He knew exactly how to make a track sound panoramic, creating massive spatial depth where a heavy, dirty bass line could sit perfectly underneath a crystal clear celestial string section.
And third, the mentor to the end. Charles Stepney didn't just work with Maurice. He mentored the entire band. He took a young Philip Bailey and taught him how to control his massive falsetto register. And he sat with Verdine White to map out bass scales that were melodically complex but rhythmically locked. Oh, and did I mention that the charts were immaculate, Mello? Charles Stepney is the genius who arranged the horns on Shining Star and the strings on Reasons. He taught Maurice how to make funk sound cinematic, giving it that panoramic widescreen depth. Man, he was the master mentor who showed them how to scale a local groove into a global symphony. And in the studio, Maurice was a clinical scientist. When tracking Shining Star in 1975, man, he wasn't happy with the acoustic displacement or the tone of the snare, if you will. So he spent 3 full days EQing a single drum hit and making the band record the track over 40 times until the pocket had the exact mathematical torque he envisioned. I don't know, seems like way too much for a snare, but Mello, that track did hit number 1 on both pop R&B charts and won them their first Grammy. So really, what do I know?
Exactly. What do we know? Well, we sure keep learning.
I bet we sure do.
Yeah, this next part hits an incredibly deep note on the ledger and explains the true emotional glue of their greatest work. In May 1976, right in the middle of tracking EWF's monumental Spirit album,
featuring the song Spirit, which is monumental in itself,
Charles Stepney suffered a sudden, fatal heart attack at just 45 years old.
Oh, that's devastating.
Yeah, the band was completely devastated. Maurice didn't just lose his co-producer, he lost his artistic North Star.
That is the ultimate test of faith on the job site, Mello. The entire camp was paralyzed with grief. They were supposed to be finishing a massive commercial monster to follow up Gratitude, but suddenly the control room felt completely empty. Maurice had to make an executive lead architect decision. He refused to let the session collapse. Realizing and accepting his schooling, Mello, because Maurice had spent over a decade studying Charles Stepney's architectural drafting methods. He huddled the band together in the studio, channeled that raw, agonizing grief directly into the tape machine. He stepped up to the console, took the master blueprints, finished the arrangements using the exact technical shorthand Stepney had taught him over the last 10 years, and then finished the album himself. He named the record Spirit as a direct, eternal dedication to the spiritual architecture of that Charles Stepney left behind.
And Max, those chord changes on the song Spirit
phenomenal.
Are an absolute masterpiece of sacred geometry. To take those sophisticated, high-level jazz modulations and voice leadings and make them feel that effortless is pure genius. And when Philip Bailey steps up to the microphone preamp and drops that sky-high, crystal-clear falsetto frequency right over the top of those heavy changes...
It's over.
Oh, it's magnificent.
Yeah, it's over. Damn straight, Mello. It's a little live seance on tape. They were building a sonic bridge to honor their fallen teacher. When the storm hits the job site, you rely on the integrity of your training. Maurice was so locked into Charles Stepney's drafting methods that he grabbed the compass, completed the construction, and turned a tragedy into a timeless, multi-platinum sanctuary. That is how you protect a legacy.
Absolutely monumental, Max. And he kept the skyscraper standing.
And we're going to keep our skyscraper standing as well by taking a break. We'll be back to put a bow on this puppy and for our final thoughts on the enduring lessons from the cosmic general contractor. Don't move.
You're chewing it up with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We're in the home stretch of this audit family. So Mello, what an incredible interstellar journey we have looked behind the curtain at. What are we taking away from the legacy of Maurice White?
Well, Max, Maurice White showed us that being an architect of soul means more than just having a good ear. It means being a protector, a curator, and a partner. He combined classical conservatory math with street-level Greece, and he had the corporate literacy to own the land he was building on.
100%, Mello, 100%. He taught us that your internal torque is dictated by the depth of your training. He didn't just chase a weekly radio hook. He engineered a sonic lifestyle brand centered around higher consciousness, clean living, and artistic autonomy. Whether it was Kalimba Productions, Denise Williams, or The Emotions, his lesson to all of us creating music today is simple. Respect the song, protect the artist's DNA, and never be afraid to innovate. Badass Mello.
He bridged the gap between the soul of the ancestors and the science of the charts. And that's why they are one of the most sampled foundations in human history now.
The math in his tracking sessions was completely perfect, Mello. Every single year, the second calendar indexes to September 21st. The global algorithm automatically syncs back to Maurice's frequency. Man, his music's been sampled, looped, and resurrected by every generation of hip-hop, R&B, and pop producers because the building blocks are indestructible.
Badia. Man,
Yes,
Maurice
right?
White gave us the full map. From the Memphis projects to the multi-platinum space station, he stayed independent and stayed true to his architecture.
He was a true architect of soul, Mello, and a brave warrior. When Maurice was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the late 1980s, as we said earlier, he calmly stepped back from the touring, but he retained 100% executive control over brand equity, and he remained the chief architect guiding the band's business assets, master licensing, and studio concepts from his home base until his transition in 2016. Because he built a timeless, uplifting sonic infrastructure rather than chasing cheap, dirty trends, man, his Cadillac pulls in millions in pure liquidity every single September when the world syncs up to his groove and that badass song. Yo, you, Maurice White, were and always will be a badass. You have certainly influenced so many, including Mello and I. And as always, we want to close with our final thought and our hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.